Okay, in this video, we are going to get this chopping board functional. Let's get it glued together. So first things first, dry fit. Right, so I've got the face sides down, so I've got this little V mark on both the bits of each and a little V mark on here. And I've also numbered them as well, so 1 and 1 and 2 and 2. So that was how I originally orientated it. And if you remember in the first episode, that was because we had the tighter grain here, wider grain here, wider grain here, tighter grain here. So it kind of tapered from wide into thin grain on the beech. So it would match the quarter sawn bit in the oak in the middle. That was more for aesthetics. And then if we looked at the end grain, on this one it scoops down, and on this one the end grain scoops up, which means that if there is any movement in this whatsoever, it will kind of cancel itself out and the chopping board won't turn into a banana. So we're going to do a quick dry fit first to make sure this does actually clamp together. Now, I said in the previous episode that you should be able to close all of these joints with just the pressure of your hands, which I can, but there is no harm in doing a quick dry fit with some clamps. So looking at this end here, that was the one that was out of square, so we're going to get this end pretty flush. You notice here when I'm gluing this up, I've got the face side down because that is the one that we have got guaranteed flatness on. These top ones where we plane to the thickness down, there's a slightly higher degree of a chance of this being a little bit out of flat. So if we make the bottom of the board off that known flat surface, you know, we're going to prevent even more problems later down the line. So that is looking really good. There is no gaps whatsoever along there. Let's just check it on this side. Yeah, I mean that side is brilliant, nothing wrong with that. So let's glue it together. So for this glue up, I'm going to use my ever trusty Cascamite, which is a powdered resin, mix it with water. It's got a long open time, it dries the same color as wood, and it's got an easy cleanup on it. You know, I just really like it. I pretty much use it for everything nowadays. Also, it's weatherproof, so if this chopping board was to be washed under a tap or something like that, the water isn't going to affect it whatsoever. And we'll keep the clamps set up like that so that we can use them straight away afterwards. Okay, so I've got an old tub of Cascamite that is empty. Open this one up and put a few scoops into here. There we go, so just break up any clumps in the Cascamite that are already there. Don't want any of those being mixed in with the water. And let's get some water into it. So add water a tiny bit at a time and then keep mixing it. You don't want to pour it all in straight away. You can mix this by weight or something like that. It does say on the side of the pot. I just tend to do it by eye until you get like a custard-like consistency. So just with that little dash of water in there, it's kind of turned it into like a breadcrumby texture, as you can see here. Oh, and there you go, and it's instantly changed from breadcrumbs into a paste. So you can see how you need to be careful with adding water here. Now it's turning from a paste into like a goo sort of thing. Bit more water in there, tiny bit I think. Right, that's pretty well mixed. You can see we've got quite a gloopy consistency going on there, which I like. And yes, I am going to glue this on my workbench. It's finished in Osmo, and this stuff is extremely brittle once it dries. So if you get little beads on there, you can literally just pop it off with your finger, which is incredibly satisfying more than anything. Right, I think that will do. So let's get that one out of the way and apply it to the edge. So make sure we get it right up to the corners in here, right up to the edges, so we get a good amount of squeeze out. Put some on the opposite face as well, just for good measure, but only do a thin amount. Okay, that'll probably do for those two, so let's pop that up on there. So down on there, down on there. Plop him on there like that. Right, make sure that the face side is down, obviously. Get that square-ish end flush. Right, that's looking good. I'm just going to scrape off this excess glue because it's a bit horrible to try and remove Cascamite after it's dry. Like I said earlier, it's very, very brittle. It has a tendency to like ping off into your eyes if you try and chisel it off, and it'll scratch up the bottom of your plane if you try and plane it off. So scrape off what you can here. Okay, and with that scraped off, I'm just going to check that this face side is all flush on the bottom, because that is our known flat surface, which it is. It's just resting on the bars of these clamps. Now just wipe down this surface of all the remaining Cascamite. Might as well get it off now, and wipe down the clamps so that it doesn't mess up the heads on them. Oh, this water's been here a while. It smells so stale. Ugh. Right, now because I've got some Cascamite left, do you remember those little splits that we had in the first video going up the side of the board? Because Cascamite dries the same colour as wood, I'm just going to use it to put into those cracks, and it'll help fill them. Just going to use my glue spreader to like squeegee it in, make sure it properly fills it. Right, so it is now the next day and the Cascamite is dry. Look, come on. I mean, I'm not going to lie, I think that's 80% of the reason I buy Cascamite, but yeah, there we go. So that's a good indication to tell us it's dry. Let's get it out the clamps. And as I said earlier, you can see how brittle this stuff is now. So if you've got lots of beads of glue along here and then you try and chisel it off, they do tend to pop up and of course inevitably hit you in the eyes. Be wary of Cascamite with that, but we're sitting flat on there. I think I've got a tiny rock going on. That might be due to a little bit of glue on the bottom more than anything. Yeah, got a big old lump of it there. So I'm gonna get rid of all that glue and finish it off, I guess. Right, so I'm going to chisel this off, so bevel down and just slightly scrape it off because I don't want this to be scratching the bottom of my plane and doing a bit of damage to it. And I can hear you saying at this point, oh no, he's using Lee Nielsen chisels to scrape off glue. Oh dear, how could you do that? You can sharpen them, who cares? I mean, saying that, I definitely could have done a better job at wiping this down. Right, so because the bottom of the board is relatively flat already, I'm going to start on that side, so let's get this nice and flat. Right, so I was using the standard 30-degree blade for this low-angle jack plane for a while, but it started tearing out the oak and it wasn't cutting too nicely on the beach here. So tried sharpening it, as you should do first, and it was still doing the same thing. So one of the things I said in my video, what planes do you need, said that the low-angle jack plane is pretty much the most versatile one you can get because you can change the angle of attack of the blade and thus reduce tear out. So what I've done is switch this to the 50-degree blade now, and it's working pretty nice. So a common tendency for some of my students to do here is, obviously they want to flush off this middle bit here and make the oak the same height as the beech. So what they do is they start trying to hit it with their plane and it's not doing anything. So what they do is they bring the blade out even more, try and get it, still not cutting, so they bring the blade out even more and then suddenly, bang, hits the oak and tears it all out. Before you start bringing the blade out, like if it was cutting okay out here and on this side, you know, that's obviously not the blade protrusion. What it is if you tilt the plane on its side like that, you might be able to see in the middle there, we got a little bit of light poking through, right through here. So that means that we've got a small dip in this board. Now, that's perfectly fine for when the board is finished because it means it's going to sit perfectly flat on either of these edges and not rock in the middle. But obviously when it comes to flushing this middle bit off, that's not going to work. So we need to bring these sides down first in order to get access to that, and then we can put the dish back into it once it's all flushed off. Okay, that's looking pretty flat. We've got a small hollow in the middle, which is good, but the plane is touching on both sides, so it's not pivoting in the middle whatsoever. And basically all this side needs is a little bit of hand sanding now to get rid of these diagonal cuts that I've just done with the plane. Tiny bit of tear out there that I can just scrape out with the cabinet scraper afterwards. Yeah, let's tackle the other side. Right, so I've been working on both sides for a while now, and that oak was being an absolute pig to try and work. There's a big old patch of reversing grain in there, which was not dealing with any of my planes. So I basically got the 50-degree blade, sharpened it as sharp as I possibly could. I actually took up my 10,000 gritstone, which I rarely use, but got it on there, and then basically just kept orientating the board in different directions to work out what was giving me the least amount of tear out on it. I found that planing diagonally across the oak was working quite well with the high angle blades, and that seemed to reduce the tear out quite a lot, which was good. So yeah, basically I sort of started putting a little bit of a dip in this, and now whatever side it sits on, that is not rocking whatsoever. So if you take the time to make sure your components aren't twisted like we did in the previous episodes, and then you stick them all together like this and just basically flush them off, plane a small hollow in it, it's going to sit flat on your desk. If it is rocking, the way to get rid of this, I'll just demonstrate to you. I'll put a shaving under here to make it start rocking. So you can see here that this side is planted on the desk and this side is rocking like this. Now, some of the things my students did is they'll see this bit rocking and they'll think, right, okay, so if I put a little mark underneath there, that's obviously the part that I need to remove the material from. Seems obvious when you look at it now, but that is obviously not the bit that you want to remove the material from. This bottom corner here is the high one that it's rocking on. Seems obvious, but at least 30% of my students did that. So yeah, that's one to look out for. But otherwise, put it flat on there, and we have got no movement whatsoever. So then if you do have one of those high spots, so say it was here or here, remember what we did in the second episode? So you can either go straight across corner to corner and get 2 adjustments. So remove that high spot, remove that high spot. Or if it's only a tiny amount, you can just remove one of the high spots. But bear in mind, once you've done that, you've dropped that corner, so then you need to plane a hollow back into it to make sure that that side isn't lifting off the surface when we put it the other side up. So I'll move that on there. There we go, so that corner's dropped off, and then just a few passes back here, just to make sure that that is back into a hollow. And similarly, if I was to do it here, remove that high spot there, and then right, so now this is flat on both sides, we can focus on chopping the ends off. Now when I was gluing this up, I made sure that one of the ends was flush, and then we only had to chop off one end. Unfortunately, it seems to have slipped in the vise, so now I've got a small step on both ends. So now I'm going to have to cut them both off. So what I'm going to do is get a large square, pop it on one side, and then a ruler to extend that square all the way across the chopping board. Get a nice dark marking device, there you go. And then obviously if you want to make this a certain length, then you can just measure it across to the next line, but it's a chopping board. Do we really care about that? Probably not. I know that this is going to end up being like 398 millimeters now, and I'm just going to wish that I'd measured an extra 2 mil, but maybe I just won't even measure it and then I'll never find out. So now I'm going to stick it in the vise. Right, and now I'll just square a line along the top, so I've got a guideline to cut to there. See, that's the waste material. Not sure how I could cut the wrong side, but you never know. And a nice cross-cut panel saw. Then you simply plane down the end grain until you get rid of all those saw marks. Just when you're doing it, make sure that you don't go off the end here, because it's just going to break out that corner obviously, so you don't want to be doing that. Work in from both sides, so then come from this way to get rid of any bits on there. Obviously this doesn't have to be perfectly flat, because again, nothing joining onto it, but it's good practice. Make sure it's flat along there, and obviously square to one of the faces as well. It's all good practice at the end of the day, but planing end grain is disgusting. Right, so the end grain is all straight, square, flushed off, cleaned up. There's no saw marks on it whatsoever. It's a bit of a job, not gonna lie. A low angle plane, a low angle jack plane, low angle block plane. I don't know why I picked up that was saying block plane, because that is the jack plane. A low angle jack plane, a low angle block plane is ideal for end grain because it slices through it a lot easier. You can still do it with one like this, but you're gonna have to make sure it is properly sharp. You should make sure that's properly sharp as well. I'm absolutely knackered, I don't really know what I'm saying, but yeah, end grain, difficult. But anyway, that went well. The only thing that I had a little bit of a kerfuffle with is on the corner here, the crisscross on my leg vise, when I clamped it up, decided to crush it, which isn't ideal. So I've basically lost a corner here. I heard this horrible cracking. It happened a tiny bit on another corner as well. But I only noticed it when it happened on here because it was quite a loud crunch. So because this chopping board is quite a weighty thing, it's actually quite a good idea to put chamfers on it so that you can put your fingers underneath and then lift it up that way rather than just try and cramp your hands on the side and get it like that. And with these chamfers, because I've got this massive split on the corner here, I'm just going to make them a little bit bigger than what I was initially going to do, which would have been around 5 millimeters. I think with this, it's going to have to be around double that now, which we'll see how it turns out. 5 millimeters looks pretty good, but oh well. So I've got the chip up this end of the board, and I'm going to put a fairly generous cut on my jack plane. And basically I'm going to count the amount of strokes along here that I need to take in order to remove that. And then once we've established that number, we can apply that to all the corners on here and get a nice even chamfer. So I'm going to just simply put the plane on there. And you notice how I'm holding it? I've got my hand underneath. If you hold it up like this, you've got more of a tendency to rock it. If you hold it underneath like this, you can use your fingers as location and bring it through. You just get a more controlled cut. There we go. I counted 32 passes. I think for a 5 mil it takes about 10. But to be honest, that's quite a nice shape we got there, I think. So yeah, it's this nice even pressure along there to make sure that you've got the nice even chamfer. And yeah, 32 strokes on all the corners. So I'll do these long ones first. What I'll do is, as I get halfway through each chamfer, just going to check the end here to see if it is actually on 45 degrees. which that one, yeah, pretty much is, so we can carry on with that. But obviously once you're halfway, say if it was too sloped this way, I could simply rest the plane on that chamfer and tilt it a little bit more this way and make that adjustment. You could also do this with a marking gauge, just scribe like 5mm along each corner and work to that. But for something like this, I wouldn't really bother. Maybe if it was fine furniture or something, I'd focus on details like that. But for this, nah. And just saying that, I've lost count of how many strokes I'm on. Damn it. And then for these edges, these can be a little bit tricky. Firstly, make sure your plane is very sharp. But what we don't want to do is break off the end here, obviously. So you could work from both sides, but then it's quite difficult getting a nice even chamfer. What I tend to do here is get a sharp plane, put it on there at 45 degrees, and then slightly skew it like this. So just bring the back end down. And when it comes off the end here, it's going to shear it upwards, and it's less likely to punch off the end because the cut's going to be more delicate. So 45 degrees on there, and then just skew it round a bit. There we go. Right, so now the chamfers meet up perfectly on the corner here, and they meet up on the corner here. Good. Right, and then for these shorter corners here, these are obviously even more difficult. So ideally you would get a little block plane for this because it's easier to handle on that small edge, but it's still pretty easy to do with the jack plane. So I've got it at 45 degrees in the vise like this. Just going to rest the jack plane on the corner like that and make sure that it's not rocking on the bevel, and then just send it through. So I'll take a few cuts, and here I can see it's taking off a little bit more at the front than it is at the back. So I'm going to rest it on that bevel again and then just tilt it up a tiny bit, and that's going to take off more of the back. Okay, that was a little bit too much, so now back again. Back a bit more. There we go, that's spot on. So I'm going to do a few more passes like that and just eyeball this bevel. Cool, right, that chamfer's done. Right, and then I'm not going to bore you with it too much because at the end of the day, no one likes sanding, but what I'm going to do is just nice long strokes with this sandpaper, 120 grit, get rid of all the rubbish that I've left over here, like small plane marks and just little bits of muck. So I'll start with 120 on here and probably finish it up with 180. No need to go any higher than that because it's going to get chopped up by a kitchen knife. And then for these tiny chamfers, I'm going to wrap them around this solid bit of wood because it's a lot harder bearing surface. Just rest it on the bevel again, and then same on these bevels, so rest the sandpaper on there, and then maybe 5 strokes, yeah, that'll do it. Right, and there you go guys, sanding is all, yeah, I've got to wipe down all the dust on it. Oh, I've got a face full of that, lovely. That's all sanded down, had to do a little bit of scraping on the oak as well. Oh, Jesus. You know, I could just refilm this, but I think that was actually quite funny. Sanded, scraped, and it is ready to be finished. I'm going to be using Osmo to finish mine. It's all made of natural ingredients. It says on here that it's safe to use on kids' toys, and you know, if it's safe to do that, then it should be safe to use on a chopping board, but obviously, as a disclaimer, I can't properly recommend it. Other finishes out there would be mineral oil, food safe finish, obviously, and even more obvious, chopping board oil, believe it or not. But yeah, depending if I have enough footage or not, I'm going to do a nice overview video of the entire build with a little bit of music in the background and show the finished result at the end of it. I might even make a sandwich on it or something like that. But anyway, I hope you found the series useful and you got some good information from it. Chuck any comments below, follow me on social media if you are on there, and I'll see you in the next video.